So when we started, we knew that tech was going to be where the growth would come from. We just miscalculated on the business model side.
Steli Harlembus is the CEO of Daily Maverick, a leading South African source of news, opinions, and investigations. We've had the privilege of sitting down with Steli to talk about the disruptions of technology and how that has affected journalism and our societies. My hope is for you to learn from him as much as I did. Hope you enjoy. Thank you very much, Steli, for joining us on the show. We really appreciate it. I mean, Daily Maverick is big time, and having you take your time to come and see us is really an honor. When you look at journalism and you look at tech, I just want to find out from you what the impact of big tech firms like Facebook and the Googles and the YouTubes has transformed the idea of journalism and how that affected Daily Maverick from 2008 until 2022.
Yeah, so Branko Brikic, our founder, came from a magazine background. So Maverick magazine was the precursor to Daily Maverick, and when that stopped publishing, the move was to go into online. He saw that the news world, that journalism was going to move into the online space in a big way, and the thinking there was that the print advertising market was going to migrate into the online space, which he was right, and everyone who was in media was right that it was going to move into the online space. Where we were wrong was that we thought it would come to news publishers and magazine publishers, but instead, when it moved, it got swallowed up by the likes of Craigslist in the classified space. So that was the first sort of slicing off at the knees for the news industry, which lost 20% of its revenue, was losing its classifieds revenue because the online offerings were better. And then came Google and Facebook. So Google brought in a whole new method of advertising through search. So search advertising became a big thing. They introduced it. They grew the advertising market when that came in. And then Facebook made a big play for display. So all these things contributed to the disruption of the news industry, which relied mostly on advertising for its revenue and the bulk of its profits. And so the business model was disrupted, and where you could go from one publisher in South Africa to another in the UK or Europe or South America or India or in America or anywhere, the business model was essentially the same. And they would derive the majority of revenue and profits from advertising and maybe cover price sales to recover the costs of printing and distribution. So when that came in, publishers were now forced to be entrepreneurial, to try and figure out, how do you create a diversified revenue stream, things that they didn't have to consider for 50, 60 years because they were protected. There were oligopolies that controlled the print market, the radio market, the TV market, because you either had high barriers to entry in the print space, or you had licenses protecting radio and TV broadcasters. And so they didn't really have to innovate for a long time. And so when the disruption came, the disruption can was kicked so far down the road that when it came for the entire industry across the world in the space of 10 years, where normally each individual business or maybe an industry is being disrupted in a region at a time, whereas this was just uniformly across the entire world. Every news publisher was struggling. So when we started, we knew that tech was going to be where the growth would come from. We just miscalculated on the business model side. So we spent the first sort of 8 years trying to figure out what business model we would be successful, would be able to sustain us. And now that we've sort of figured that out, we can put some more resource behind that to fund the growth, to look at ways of managing the growth. But it was really tough because no one, like anywhere in the world, had a clue on how to solve this problem. And the New York Times had a come to Jesus moment in 2014 when they had this big internal look at themselves and they said, if we carry on down this path, we're screwed. And that was the New York Times. Had been around for over 100 years and had all these resources, huge listed company, And they basically said, we don't change this, we're screwed. And luckily enough, they did, and they everything that they said they would do in that innovation report in 2014, not too long ago. I mean, that's only 8 years ago. They were on a, their homepage was losing, it wasn't even growing. They were losing visitors to their homepage. And they turned that ship around, and they became a, digital subscriptions, shining light for the rest of the world. But that's how dire it was. And so that's, that was 5 years into our journey. Obviously, South Africa is, 5 to 6 years, if not a little bit more, behind more developed markets like Europe and the States when it comes to these trends playing out and critical mass sort of migrating into the digital advertising side. So we had to figure out, what does that look like? And every news publisher now, and the big challenge with news publishing is every news publisher has to figure out their own model. And that's what's so difficult, is that they just haven't had to think like that for so long. And so how do you innovate? How do you find the right mix of revenue that, aligns with your vision? All these things that make it really difficult. And then also at the same time, you've got to acquire new skills, right? So you need massive product and technology input and effort and resources. I mean, you look at the New York Times, they've got about 1,700 journalists, and they've got about 700 product and technologists. I mean, that ratio is almost like, one product and technologist for every 2 journalists, which is a huge number. But they're essentially, you'll hear people say this, every business today needs to be a tech business or tech-enabled business in order to sustain itself. So you need developers, you need product people, you need e-commerce people. I mean, as we've grown and we've moved into the reader revenue space with our membership program, we've either had to hire new skills or grow them or develop them ourselves that we didn't think were part of the news industry 5 years ago, or in our world. And so now you start competing with corporates, international corporates, for these skills, which are really hard to find and then afford, because you start competing with people who are paying in dollars, which I'm sure you guys also experience as well. I mean, going massively into the tech space and the 4-hour space, is that those skills are in demand, and they're very hard to come by. And if you do, you're competing with some huge companies for that. So that was kind of our experience going into that space.
Stelly, do you think that, and I think this also happened during COVID and pre-COVID a lot in the US election with Trump, do you think with the likes of Facebook and Twitter and all these online, with the amount of fake news around, do you think maybe that, because you have these reports come out, you never know if there's validation behind it, but for example, if Daily Maverick have reported it, or New York Times, then there's an accreditation. Do you think that as a result of all this, because you just don't know anymore what you can believe, do you think that is a benefit for you guys?
It is both a opportunity and a risk and a challenge at the same time. It's one of those sort of paradoxes of life. So look, we can't sit here and say that we have a divine right to advertising, that doesn't belong to us, So if they build a better mousetrap, fine, that's awesome. Well done, guys. You won that game, right? But what is really hard to swallow is that we are then forced to play by different rules. So what I mean is, and this is how it relates to your point, Zig, is that if we publish something, right, and we get it wrong, or we publish something and we know it's false, or we get a contribution from someone outside of our organization and it turns out to be false, we are liable for that because we made an editorial decision to publish that. Now that's where you have to call bullshit on what's happened. Is that okay, guys? You built a better advertising mousetrap, great. You take all the revenue, but they're exempt from liability in the States because when they wanted the internet to flourish back in the day, so in the 90s, Section 230 of the Communications Act exempted them from liability on the basis that telephone companies were exempted from liability when in acts of crime. So, for example, if robbers were planning to rob a bank using a telephone, you couldn't hold AT&T liable as being complicit in the robbery and planning of the robbery, which makes sense, right? You can't do that. And so they use that thinking to absolve internet companies from liability in the same space. Now that led a huge, and that's where we went wrong, was we equated the internet and the ability to share stuff and the ability of internet companies to make editorial decisions by algorithms to put that content in front of other people, which is very different to the AT&T, which is one-on-one, or you've got to know who you're speaking to, and AT&T doesn't take that information and then go and share it and put it in front of susceptible or vulnerable people, and so that it then gets amplified, which is why they've gotten away with murder in some cases, literally, with this. And so it is obviously an opportunity for us to become a beacon of trust and truth, but at the same time, it's damaging democracies. It's it's enabling genocide. It is compromising.
But elections. That's the point. So what you're saying, so just for people out there that don't understand the legalities behind it, because I heard them talk a lot about Section 230 and on CNBC and Bloomberg, and I think there was a big move by the Republicans to actually potentially have it removed, right, Stilly, out of the thing, because what they're saying is Goodwill can come along, make a whole lot of statements on Twitter and Facebook and whatever you want to do, okay, and it can be complete bullshit, okay. Daily Maverick comes along, writes an article, you don't like what they're writing about, you're saying it's bullshit, okay. I've gone and said the exact same thing about you on Facebook, okay, but now they can be sued, but you can't sue me if I'm in America. Am I right, Stilly? That's what we're saying.
Yeah. So you can, you can take action against the person who said that, but you can't take action against Facebook. Now,
correct. But Facebook knows it. But Facebook knows it's false, and this is where the problem comes.
Yeah.
And that's why there was this big furore about Elon Musk and them removing Trump off Twitter. So Twitter decided to remove him from Twitter because of whatever. There were false statements. There was whatever. But again, it comes on. Well, if you can have an open platform in a Section 230, then anyone should be able to say anything, right? That's the way I see it.
So it comes down to this: is like it doesn't fundamentally change whether it's open or not. It's just whether there's liability for stuff that is illegal. So, for example, why should we exempt the platforms if someone goes out and organizes a crime, right, by just calling people or organizing it in person, it's still a crime, right? But if you do it on a social media platform, which then takes your incentive or your desire to organize a crime and then amplifies it so that more people then participate in the crime, and you have made a decision to amplify that because you set your algorithms up that way, then you should be liable for it. And that's all we're saying is, if we did that, we would be in trouble. Well,
but you'd be in trouble because you'd be in trouble because you're a newspaper, you're an accredited media house, right?
Yeah.
That's why you'd be in trouble.
So exactly.
So if you weren't, so if you weren't a media house, if you just said I was Stilly and Goodwill, whatever blog, and we went and did that, there couldn't be any liability.
Yeah. So can I just ask a question here? Is this a conversation around if tech needs to be kept liable or journalism needs to be kept liable? Because I'm still struggling to understand which one is in question here.
Yeah. So in South Africa, news organizations or reputable news organizations are members of the Press Council. So we abide by a code of ethics. There are rules that we have to follow with regards to publishing, and we take responsibility for what we publish. So if we publish something that you guys don't like, you can complain to the Press Ombudsman. The Press Ombudsman will investigate and then make a ruling saying, no, you're wrong, or Daily Maverick, you need to apologize and retract, and this is what we say you guys should do. And then if we want to remain members of the Press Council, then we'll abide by that, right? And you obviously build your controls and your culture around making sure that you are able to defend those. And we often have to defend complaints to the ombudsman because people often don't like what we write. The other
just on that point, just so Goodwill knows, how many lawsuits have you had? How many times have you been sued, Sterling? How many lawsuits are you dealing with? A lot.
So this year we've had eight summonses to appear in court, which are, so now what's happened is the other route that you can take is that you can bypass the press ombudsman, which was designed for quick and effective relief for people who were transgressed by poor journalism or lack of ethics, for example. The other route is to go the legal route, and the legal route is obviously more expensive. But for the man in the street, the Press Council was established to give the man in the street a free, quick option of relief that the industry subscribed to. But there are publishers who've extracted themselves from that, so they don't belong to that. And the only route available is to now go the legal, expensive route, which is what the likes of the independent media stable have done in South Africa. But they've also then used that as a way to then weaponize the law against us by charging us with all sorts of counts of defamation and other aspects of the law, and then now causing us to spend money, spend time, spend energy and resource and capacity defending these claims, which are all spurious. So the law can be weaponized against you, and Europe is now passing what's called SLAP laws, which is laws that prevent people from using strategic litigation against public practice organizations from doing that. And so we will need to get there as a country, but that's how this stuff is playing out. But you could legitimately have a legal action against us. The problem is that in the US, where the majority of these organizations are based, Twitter, Facebook, and Google, Section 230 absolves them from any legal liability for what is published on their site. So they go and say, well,
even if they know it's not true.
Yeah, I mean, they will claim that they don't monitor everything because there's so much of it that's being created, and this is user-generated content. And so they go, it's user-generated content, it's not our problem. But the minute your algorithm promotes that content to someone else, you've made an editorial decision. Whether it was done by a machine or a human,
it doesn't matter.
Made an editorial
decision. You've promoted,
and you should be liable.
Absolutely.
Liable. And so the thing is, and they go, well, it's going to cost too much. I go, well, guys, you're making all this money, and you now have to. The cost of making all this money is that you must be responsible for what you publish. People are creating this stuff for free. Awesome, great for you. But now you must take the downside of that, which is making sure that stuff doesn't. Because we have seen in Myanmar and other places where genocides have started,
orchestrated because of that.
Yeah, because of false information that was then pushed out on Facebook, and they didn't do any, and they weren't liable. They didn't do anything to stop it, and so that is the risk that we have. We've seen how Brexit was compromised with data that was received and used by people who might be susceptible to lies. I mean, they were outright lies, but you couldn't see them if you were like people in the know. They targeted those people and they pushed lies. Like Turkey was going to be part of the EU if we carried on, and the NHS was going to fall over. All these kind of things, these lies that were pushed. And then again for Trump in the States. So elections, democracy is compromised because there is no liability for these platforms. If there was liability, they would invest a ton more resource in making sure that those kind of things don't happen. And that's what they are trying. That's what they lobby for.
Instead of spending 10 billion on the metaverse, he'd be spending 10 billion on his algorithms, making sure that they're hunky-dory.
So here's a question that I'm thinking about. So on one hand, if you think about how Trump won the elections using the algorithm, or at least it looked as if he's doing that, and then how it affected Hillary Clinton.
Yes.
How is that different from when in South Africa we have elections? ANC, and I'll use them. ANC goes to a very impoverished area. They put banners. They give food
Give
to
t-shirts.
give T-shirts to affect votes. How is this different? On one hand, it's tech, and on the other hand, it's non-tech. But the
question.
principle, it's the
Same
same.
thing, yeah.
So yes, we might challenge tech and remove tech, but this thing has been ongoing. So is the question the tech, or is it the people themselves, or the political parties, or the conglomerates?
So you've got look. A political party is allowed to campaign. The law says that you are allowed to campaign as a political party. You're allowed, and there are guidelines and rules around that, right? And so you can use election posters, but if you lie on an election poster, for example, in this country, you can complain to the IEC. They will demand that you take it down, for example, if you make a false claim. And sometimes we've seen that. We've seen political parties complain about campaigning tactics or messages that have gone out, right? And so you are legitimately allowed to campaign as a party. The big difference is that these social media companies, by their very nature and what they're designed to do, is to make messages shareable and to get them out into the world a lot further, with greater reach, and with people that you wouldn't be able to influence at a rally where you've gone and you've done that yourself on a sort of a one-to-one basis. And that's where the problem is that those decisions to amplify lies and disinformation campaigns is where the problem is, because they are absolved of the responsibility to, and this is why they don't want to get into it. And this is why I believe Elon Musk will not follow through with the Twitter purchase, is because this stuff is messy. It's hard and it's nuanced, and it's like there's gray areas, and where do you draw the line, and how do you determine what is illegal even from one country to the next? Because there's different, like what could be illegal here is not illegal in the next country. And so it's messy, and it would require thousands and thousands and thousands of humans, right? Which ends up being they would almost, in some cases, they'd have to add another 50% to their payroll just to be able to moderate all the stuff that's there, because
which kind of defeats the object of scaling, being a scalable tech business, eh?
Exactly, and then all of a sudden they're not such great companies anymore, because they don't have this exemption, and that's why they're fighting tooth and nail with lobbyists and all sorts of efforts to make sure that they don't. But in the meantime, we as a society, global society, are being affected by this, because some people genuinely believe that we cannot have free and fair elections as long as this rule is in place. I mean, that's how strongly some people believe it. And if we look at Brexit and we look at Trump's election in 2016, there's a strong argument for that.
That point is scary. The thing that I want to get back to is, because I'm Gen Z, born in 99, I never watched the news, never have. And when I look at my parents, when I go back home, I still see my father sitting at the TV watching news.
Mine as well, every night watches the news. Yeah. It doesn't matter what happens, 7 o'clock, got to put the news on. I'm like, for what? You watch the news at lunchtime and you watch the news in the morning, Now I've got to watch the weather. I mean, I'm like, really?
Yeah, we don't, and I'm sure there's many people like me who just don't watch the news. So for the Daily Mavericks, how do you guys create flexibility around this new and upcoming generation that doesn't know why journalism even exists? Why should I care about Malema and Ramaphosa and all these guys, whether in South Africa or in different countries? How do you create flexibility in the company?
So, Goodwill, this is a theme or an area of journalism that comes up quite a lot, is the question of younger audiences. At the same time, we're also seeing a lot of people avoiding the news for a range of different reasons, right? Whether it's too bleak, or it's not in the right format, or
can't believe it. I mean, I find myself a lot of things. You're like, well, that's bullshit. I'm just not reading that.
Yeah.
So credibility is a big problem.
On that. Sorry,
trust.
Sorry, during COVID, I wasn't watching. Everybody was watching news when the first lockdown. The reason why I wasn't watching was because it was giving me anxiety. Like, I literally would sleep at night thinking the following day I wouldn't wake up. It was just too much, and I just was like, all right, I'm not gonna watch.
So all of these are valid reasons why, or we're seeing from research why people are avoiding the news, right? So lack of trust in journalism. Although a recent Reuters report put South Africa second out of a basket of countries where people still had trust in news organizations, or we were second on the list compared to others. But yes, and driving anxiety, not knowing who to trust, short attention spans. So you start reading something on your phone where 80 to 90% of all digital consumption now happens on mobile phones. How long can you go on your phone without a notification coming up? WhatsApp or Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is. And so it's very hard for news publishers to now go, okay, and then there's thing of like, well, we need to get in front of younger audiences. Well, why do we want to get in front of younger audiences? Well, they are the future. They are where all our growth is going to come from. And in many countries as well, that's where their potential audience growth and revenue growth will come from. Obviously, in South Africa, it's a different aspect because we've got 70% youth unemployment, or 65 to 70% youth unemployment. So how do you reach people who are unemployed, don't have economic prospects, where data is so expensive, where there's language challenges as well? So, and do you go, oh, we must just go after younger audiences, or do you go, hang on a second, let's figure out what is important for society as a whole to cover as a news organization, and then let's go package it in a way that is attractive to younger audiences, which is very different to like, what do younger people or younger audiences want, and then go and create the journalism or news or entertainment news or whatever it is. Because if you ask people what they want, it's very different to often what they need. And so in the type of journalism that we do, we have to figure out what is it that society needs us to respond to and to allocate our resources to, that is going to end up creating a better society, help protect our democracy, help people navigate life, and then find out what are those key themes, and then create them in a way that is more palatable, more appealing to younger audiences. So is that video? Is that short snippets? Is it a TikTok? Like I don't know. We're still figuring that out, because the 1,000-word or the 800-word article resonates with older audiences, because that's how we learn to consume news, for example. Whereas now we've got to find new ways where people struggle to pay attention for long periods of time, because that's social media and Twitter and notifications and Netflix and all this kind of stuff is just blinking and shouting for our attention all the time. So it's a tough one for us to figure out. But the entire industry is trying to do that. But we're just focusing on the key underlying foundational principle in this has to be, what does the country need? What does society need us to focus on? Because if we just go chasing what people read the most or what people say they want, then we're not going to get to the right place. We've got a vision, and we've got the needs of our audiences, and where they overlap is where we need to spend more of our time and resource.
It's interesting that you say that. The following question that I have is, so now when you're running a company like that, and that is the problem that you're faced with, do you hire more content creators who, right now, content creation doesn't have a formal education? It's just someone who has a talent or a passion. They just know how to do videos really well. Or do you still go journalist way, where someone will do an undergrad for 3 years and they're qualified and they can show that they've been in school? How do you balance the two, where you're trying to have cool content that your clients can consume, but it has to be true and right, and it still has to appeal and be consumable by your ideal client? How do you find the fine line between the two?
Well, I mean, for the first sort of 5 years of being around, we actively didn't hire people with a journalism degree. Like we got bloggers, we got people who approached us, submitted op-eds, people with a politics background, people with a, like I said, blogging background, people who just were good writers, where we felt like we could, okay, great, there's talent there's creative talent, we can teach the journalism side, and so let's go forward on that basis. And obviously, as we've grown, we've then we've attracted and recruited people with histories in journalism, and so the experience counts more than, let's say, what they studied, because it's such a public facing profession, right? Because I don't need to check, I basically barely need to check references. I can just go and pick up and read or watch or listen to anything you've created as a journalist, and I'll know whether that's good stuff or not, and so we can make hiring decisions based on that. But we do, in having to try and package this in different ways, we need to get new skills in, and we can't just recruit people who've been written journalists or come from print. Anyone who says I'm a print journalist, you kind of go, well, actually, your medium shouldn't define you. You're a journalist. It doesn't matter how you distribute your content. You're a journalist first, and then you find ways of distributing that. And so we're open to we get applications. We've got our internship training program, where we do now work closer with some journalism departments, because they have recognized the need for them to be videographers as well as audiophiles and written journalists, as well as also thinking about the business side and marketing your content. And so they have responded eventually to the changing needs of the journalistic environment. And so we can now be more confident in recruiting from that pool, but also open to other people who have different skill sets.
Sig mentioned a point earlier when it comes to hiring people, and this is a question to both you and him, where he says you have a person who you've given him, I'll put a number, you give him 30,000 Rand a month, but from tech platforms like Upwork or Fiverr, they can triple that salary based off the same job, because they are hiring from a German company or a US company. So now when you're faced with an internal person who's really, really good, and then you give them 30 grand and they come to you and they say that, well, I can get 70, taking the money you give me and what I can get as a freelancer elsewhere. How do you navigate yourself around that situation as leaders of organizations?
It's a good question. I think, from our side, I think you need to get them to buy into your vision and what you're trying to create, and get them to understand that maybe in the short term there might be less money, but if the startup and the things that you want to do with your business come to fruition, it's almost like short-term pain for long-term gain. That's how I try and deal with it. We have it we struggle to keep especially the millennials and the Gen Z guys. I mean, we have a lot of these guys that come in, they work for us for 3 years, and then they move on. They have good experience and they can go and earn more money, and I get that. I was also young once, but what I try and do is get them into what we're trying to do vision-wise and buy into that. That's just my approach.
Stilly?
Yeah, look, sometimes that's all you have to compete on is the vision, and also, I guess, the impact that you're trying to make in the world, and you compete on that basis. I mean, and sometimes there are people who are just completely purpose driven, especially in our world. Like it's to decide to enter this world of journalism where you're going to get paid maybe not as well, not maybe, but most definitely not as well as some other professions, to take on more risk than most other professions, requires a dedication to something bigger than yourself. And so you do, but that's also why we've lost half of the people that work in the media sector in the last decade. We've lost half of those people because people, either the market has shrunk and can't accommodate those people, or they leave for higher paying jobs with less risk in corporate communications, for example. That's one way we lose a lot of people too as an industry. We don't have a lot of staff turnover, although having said that, we've just lost one of our senior business writers to a fund manager on that basis that they could offer them a lot more money. And you kind of go, well, look, it's no hard feelings. I understand that, this is life. You got to, put food on the table, but there was just no way we could match, what was being offered. But we keep a lot of the other people, and that's by staying true to the vision and staying true to the mission, and also making that part of the culture of the organization, that it's evident from the time that they walk in here. The culture is a mission-driven culture, that people feel it in everything that you do, that it's everything.
Passion. You gotta have the passion. Yeah, you gotta it's like when you work into this place, you can feel it.
Yeah.
And you have people that work a lot of these clever oaks that work for us, they're not interested in money. Yes, they have certain number, but if you're not challenging them every day, some of these tech guys that are properly clever, and it's the same, I suppose, with journalism. If you're not challenging them with that story, that big break. I mean, some of these journalists work on one story for like a year. It's nearly 18 months before they publish it. It can happen if it's a big story. It's the same if you're not challenging them with a new problem and solving the new problem, and no day in general marks the same, you'll lose those guys.
Yeah.
So, and then, being able, so managing talent is essentially what we're talking about. And having a plan to grow people along with the growth of the organization, but growing them along their careers with opportunities, with challenges, having them feel like they're part of the bigger picture, that they're part of how strategies are set and how they're played out, how to innovate and solve problems and be creative and work autonomously and all those things. Is like, so the culture that you create is important, because often you'll hear people say that when they leave, sometimes it is just for the money, but other times they leave because they the environment is not what they want, or they go and they get this big salary, and then after a while they go,
and they come back. They come back. And
so,
I know when they come back, like a good guy, he's there for life. But I mean, still, are you happy in your life?
Yeah, it's like I am. Look, happiness is one of like 8 different emotions.
I was a bit worried about you. I was a bit worried about you 5 years ago when you told him you became a fucking vegan. I was really worried about you. But he stopped eating meat. He's a Greek and he stopped eating meat. He comes to my house for like a long week, and now I'm not eating meat anymore. I'm like, what? Are you okay?
You've become healthier, Stevie.
My mum still goes, what about chicken? I'm like, yes, mum, that's meat too.
So
I'm still not eating meat.
When they asked me to bring salad to a bra, I bring chicken. My mates the other day invited me and told me to bring salad, and I brought a big chicken. Like, what's this? That's the salad.
It says a light salad.
No, but are you happy still? Are you happy with what you? I mean, you. I don't think you ever would have thought your life would have turned out like this, right? No, that's what I want to know. Are you happy with where you are?
Yeah. At the time when you're going through it, like anything, it's fucking hard, right? It's hard. It's stressful. It's like you're worried about people. You're worried about people's livelihoods. I mean, there was a time when I had my son's school fees, and I had payroll coming up, and I had to make a choice between like, okay, what left of my credit card balance do I throw into one of these two things? And I go, well, the school hasn't sent me like an overdue notice yet, so they can wait. And it goes,
payroll.
you pay payroll, right? And then you kind of figure it out. So there were plenty of times like that where you make those kind of hard decisions, and you think, is it the right thing to do? And like, are you doing? But then over time, you look back now and you go, you look at this mountain that's been climbed and the things that we've achieved and the impact that we've had, and even if it goes, if it all falls down tomorrow, we can be super proud of what we've achieved. And
absolutely.
And I can be personally content that I had a role to play in that, and a
massive role still. Like I said earlier, a massive role. I think the whole of South Africa don't know the role that you played in us actually still sitting, and the fight's going on. I mean, before we went on air, you heard me talking to him about what's happening currently with the president, and he's under fire and all that kind of stuff. The fight's there. I mean, this is real stuff. But we carry on with our lives. We don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But there are people like these people that are behind in the trenches that are actually fighting for us, and we don't know that.
You
didn't know that. You didn't know that, Goodwill.
Yeah, no,
you didn't even know what Daily Maverick was when I said to you, what about getting Stilly on?
True.
You didn't.
True, I didn't. True. Yeah.
So, that's why I just wanted to know from you, because, I mean, I also reflect, and obviously my situation is a bit different because, we also went through the same thing as what you went through. I mean, I told you, went 3 years, we didn't earn salaries as directors. For 3 years, 4 of us didn't earn anything, not 1 cent. But, in my situation, it was different because I could see the commercial, I could see the light at the end of the tunnel, I could see kind of what we were doing, and that in your situation, it's different because you're relying on people giving you money, and I mean, that's really tough to be able to get through that. And I think you'll succeed, Silly. I think you've done the hard work. I think although some days you might feel it's still dark out there, but I mean, if I look at you now and I look at the organization and kind of what you guys are doing with your membership and all these other things, I didn't even know that you were branching out into making documentaries. I think that's a great idea. I mean, I love watching documentaries, especially if it's something that sits quite an interesting thing, and it's kind of close to your heart. I think those are all good things, and I think you the fact that you've got here and you're still here, for me, is the hard work's been done. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, look, it's like you said earlier, is that you have different problems. You graduate to a better class of problems, but you will always have problems. They'll just be different ones, And like you guys, you guys have had a lot of success, but it's people only see the success sometimes, and they go, they don't know those 3 years of like not paying, or like the hard decisions, or the fights with banks. And
partners and everybody, wives also. It couldn't have been easy for your wife and your family. Couldn't be easy for them either.
No, it's not, because they have to put up with all the strain that it takes on your relationship, on your family life, on the sacrifices that you make, and
also just on that point, your wife also knows that you can go out tomorrow and you can go and earn a 6-figure salary if you really wanted to. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? So it's like, well, why are you doing this, but you're doing that? Why? Why I'm not understanding. You have to have those conversations with people as well. Say, look, there's a bigger plan here, but they can't get into your psyche, and it's all those sacrifices that ultimately I believe they do pay off in the long term. And I'm not talking about money, Goodwill. It's not about, yes, money for me, it's never been about the money. Yeah. I've always believed that if you do what you enjoy doing, the money will come. Whether that means you're well off or you can survive. But if you do what your passion is, it's about the other stuff, about making the difference and creating this business, and seeing this thing mature into something, and seeing the difference that you can make in people's lives, especially with him more so than in our situation. But that's what it's about. And then later on, the money will come.
Yeah.
And I've always believed that, and I've never really worried about money. I think if you're a person that worries about money, you won't go and explore those opportunities, because exactly what you said, it'll give you that anxiety. And a lot of people don't want to have that anxiety. They just want to know, I'm going to earn X, and I know I can survive, and I can take care of my family, and so forth.
So closing the conversation, I'm very interested in, so this is an opportunity for both you, Stilly, and you, Sig. Let's assume you had 1 million young people who are coming up, and these people want to work for Daily Maverick and Gendermark, and at this point they're naive, they don't know anything. What is your why as a person individually? They're gonna watch this in the next 5 years, and they want to know, if it's not money, what is it for you, and what is it for you, so that they can come in and bring the energy and do the work and take the company forward in the next 5 years.
Yeah, I'll go first. Goodwill, and we talk a lot about our mission, and we touched earlier on the impact of disinformation in society today, and how that can have huge consequences for society. And so we often talk about that, or it is our mission is to defend the truth, is to defend truth in a time when it is under attack, when it's been used as a weapon, when it's been abused in so many different ways, and how that affects people. And we don't realize how important it is to just maintain that center, because we can't, if we end up in a society, look at America at the moment. They can't even agree if a piece of paper is white, because it's got it's so partisan, it's so like extreme left or extreme right or whatever it is. They just can't agree that is white, and we don't want to get to that place, because we haven't had that sort of rivalry of split down the middle type of politics for a long time, because we've just had basically effectively a single party state. And so for us, it's imperative that the time that we have now is to build a center of truth and a center of trust that, like, it's not a debate. If Daily Maverick published it, we know it's the truth. And I think that there's that opportunity for us and the opportunity for people to be part of that in some way, whether it's working for us, whether it's supporting our journalism, whether it's reading and sharing our journalism, or watching it, or helping us grow and to become that center of trust. Then I'd say that's the mission, and we want people to we use the language, join our cause, all the time, and that it remains, that mission is at the center of what we do, and something that people can join us, can join around us through that cause.
Sure. So following on that, on their cause, so we've got our slogan, I am gender mark.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Why do we have I am gender mark? So for us, as you know, we want to do this digital Ubuntu. So for young people, it's about giving them the ability to innovate and using technology and to digitize and help people to be better in their lives. Help them achieve things that will give them and their children the opportunities that people haven't had, like your father and your grandfather, because of the previous regime and stuff like that. And not just in South Africa, in India, all these developing countries, in South America, there's probably 3-4 billion people in the world that don't have those opportunities. And I feel with what we're doing and the ecosystem that we're creating, that's what it's about for me. Okay, and like I told you in the previous podcast, if I can help one person, just one, but hopefully, talking about those million people, hopefully we can inspire them to get their ideas, and take that forward, because they're the ones that are going to take the next generations forward. It's not me and Stilly. I mean, Stilly's a bit younger than me, but in the next 20 years, we need to have those younger guys coming up, those million people, and taking that forward, whatever that journey might be. But we need to be able to give them the platform to take the step up to the next side of it. And it's not about money. We've got it wrong in the world that it's nice to have money and to be comfortable in that, but it's not about money. It's about that. And I think if everybody could have that kind of viewpoint, I think we'd have a better world that we live in. And we're going down some really bad rabbit holes. We're creating some serious problems for our generations with sitting in the metaverse and these issues. But I think you've got to take the good part of it and use that innovation to make the world a better place. And I think we that's what we're trying to do with our platforms and our ecosystems and the different initiatives that we've done. And it's like you guys, I mean, you have made a difference, Lily. I just want to tell you, like you say, that's what you're going to go for. And I keep reiterating this point. South Africa doesn't actually know what they owe you, because if you take Daily Maverick out of it, I don't think we'd be sitting here, Goodwill. Me and you wouldn't be having this conversation. I think I'd be sitting somewhere I'm serious. I'm dead serious. I don't think we would have met.